Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Opt to Thrive. If you change your thoughts, you can change your life. My very favorite mind management strategy ever.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
A bit of a gray day out there. Winter, I think, has truly landed. So all of the fig tree leaves are gone. The grapevines, they're looking a bit sparse. A lot of the fruit trees are too, except the oranges. So it's nice to have fresh oranges and mandarins this time of the year. But that's about, I think, all we've got out there. Still lots of really pretty blooms out in the garden, lots of winter color. I picked a beautiful bouquet of flowers from the garden for the house yesterday. I've got my son coming up to stay for the long weekend with his girlfriend this weekend. They'll be here today. So I am getting this podcast all recorded and ready so that when they get here, I can just sit back and enjoy the time with them and not be preoccupied with my creative endeavors. At the moment, I'm sitting watching the bird bath out the front of the sunroom, and there's a few different types of birds out there just sharing their time in the bath, and they look like they're really enjoying it, frolicking in and out of the water. So today, we're going to take a little bit of a different direction. So in my very first podcast, if you listen to that one, I told you all that I didn't want to just do medical information here, but that I also wanted this space to be a place where I could pass on some of the tools and the strategies I've learned over the years that have really helped me find my way off of the trajectory that was set by my parents, beating the odds, I suppose, for children growing up surrounded by domestic violence, drug addiction, and mental illness. So the odds were not in my favor, but I have managed to find my way out, and I've managed to build a life that I just love, the life that I want. It's happy, fulfilling, a successful life, let's say. And so today I want to share with you the single most helpful mental health hack I've learned by far, and that's the thought model. Now, a disclaimer before we get started, I'm not a trained psychologist. I do have some mental health training as a GP, but I'm not a trained psychologist, and the information that I'm giving today is around strategies to help you manage your mind, strategies that have been very helpful for me and many others. But if you suffer from a mental illness, though these strategies are probably going to be helpful for you, they're in no way a substitute for work with a trained counselor or a psychologist. If you're having thoughts of harming yourself or of harming others, please, I urge you today, reach out to your GP, your mental health professional, or if those are not accessible to you today, then your local emergency department. Okay, so one major thing I've learned in my life is that I have no control over what other people think of me. I really only ever have control over what I think of me. And what other people think of me is really none of my business. If you can get your head around those two things, you'll be making a huge step in the direction of freeing yourself from a lot of suffering. To some people, this may seem like obvious information, but I can assure you many people still believe they do have control over what other people think of them. And you could have this sneaky little belief and not even realize it. Let me give you an example. The people that can't seem to say no because that might make someone not like them or think badly of them. The truth is that by saying yes when they really want to be saying no is often an attempt to manipulate the other person into thinking nice things about them. It's really important that we distinguish doing something to manipulate other people's opinions of us and whether we're doing it for other possible reasons. If you're sacrificing really important self-care time with your family, or nurturing other relationships, then I think you need to have a really good reason for saying yes when you want to say no. Like sometimes we do say yes when we don't really want to, but maybe we do it out of love. like going to some event with your partner that you have no interest in, but you know that they love it when you go with them, and it's nurturing the connection that you have with them. We'll explore this example a bit later in the thought model. It's a really good example of how awesome the model can be. Now, there could be a variety of other valid reasons for doing things you really don't want to do, like some days we'd rather stay home, potter around the house, or read a good book than go to work. But we choose to pay our bills and feed our families. So we go out of responsibility, integrity, commitment, accountability, whatever resonates with you. But the point I am trying to make here is that by owning our choices, we can release ourselves from the suffering that comes from doing things we don't want to do purely out of an attempt to manipulate someone else, either in how they feel about you or in trying to get them to behave in a certain way. That only ever really ends in tears, and it's usually not them that's crying. I know all about this saying yes when you want to say no concept, because I spent a lot of years doing that. I spent many years thinking that if I could just do the right things, say the right things, act the right way, I could keep everyone happy and everyone would like me. It was exhausting, and I was giving away my power in how I felt, letting other people determine how I felt. No doubt the products of my colorful upbringing. The actual thought that I was attempting to manipulate everyone around me never crossed my mind, nor did I consciously think I was trying to control what others thought of me. It wasn't something that I was really aware of until I found the work of Brooke Castillo. Brooke Castillo has come up with something called the thought model. So it took me a while, but I finally worked out that I definitely do not have control over what other people think, say, or do, period. But I do have complete control over what I think, say, or do. Again, this may seem obvious, but a lot of us spend our lives feeling at the complete mercy of our thoughts, maybe not even realizing our emotions and actions are triggered by our thoughts, and thinking that our thoughts just happen to us. The idea that we can choose our thoughts is freedom from suffering. What I've learned is yes, we do have automatic thoughts that seem to just pop into our head, but we have the choice of what to do with the thought, and we can be more deliberate with our thinking. Our thoughts can cause us so much unnecessary pain and suffering. The thought model is freedom. So as I said, the thought model comes from Brooke Castillo. Brooke is a life coach, and I found her about 7 years ago when I stumbled across her podcast, the Life Coach School podcast. As a GP, we're often in the position of listening and guiding our patients, and often expected to do some counseling, as we are frequently the first port of call when someone's seeking help. I've done some mental health training, but when I discovered this thing called life coaching, I could see that it would be a really good tool for my GP toolbox. Often we see patients who aren't mentally ill, but they're just really stressed out with life, work, family, relationships, or maybe they're just stuck in life. I think we've all felt that way from time to time. So having some skills in life coaching made perfect sense to me. At the same time, learning these skills was helpful in my own personal development. So Brooke has a background in psychology, and she has very cleverly created this thing called the thought model. If you go to a counselor, psychologist, etc., or even some GPs, you might get a kind of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT is what we call it for short. CBT is based on the premise that psychological problems are based in part on faulty or unhelpful ways of thinking and or learned patterns of unhelpful behavior. And CBT is also based on the premise that people suffering from psychological problems can learn better ways of coping with them, which then can relieve their symptoms and improve their lives. CBT usually involves working on changing thinking and behavioral patterns. So cognitive, thinking, and then behavioral. What you do, your actions, how you behave. Examples might be facing one's fears instead of avoiding them, like with phobias or social anxiety could be another. Using role-playing to prepare for potentially problematic interactions with others, so thinking about it ahead of time and how you might respond, and considering the outcome that you would like to have, and how you'd like to respond in that situation. The thought model is brilliant here. And also learning to calm one's mind and relax one's body. So relaxation techniques are really good here. I have one that you can access for free on my website, optothrive.com. You should check it out. So CBT kind of helps people learn to be their own therapist so that they can learn to change their own thinking, problematic emotions, and their behavior. Brooke used these principles and came up with the thought model. The 5 components of the model are the circumstance, thought, feeling, action, and result. It all starts with the circumstance. Everything starts with the circumstance. And as I've just stated, we do not have control over anyone but ourselves. So the circumstance is always neutral. It's just the facts. It's something that could be proven in a court of law. In the example that I've already mentioned about doing something out of love for your partner, let's use something like that as an example. So let's use the example that my husband has planned for us to go camping this weekend. That's the circumstance. Factual, there's no drama. It just is what it is. My husband has planned for us to go camping this weekend. Now that's very different than my husband has planned for us to go camping this weekend, even though he knows I don't really like it, and I have so many other things that I could be doing. The circumstance is always neutral. There's no drama. The drama comes, as you could see, when we have a thought about it. The other things you've added on here are really just your thoughts. The circumstance is not positive, it's not negative, it just is until you have a thought about it. So the thought is the next part of the model. It's what you're making the circumstance mean. What thought are you having about it? So I would restate that circumstance. To be very clear, the circumstance is my husband has planned for us to go camping this weekend. Okay, so what thought are you having about it? You may be having several different thoughts about this, and for each thought, you would need to do a different thought model. It's really helpful to do the thought model when you're upset, but you can't seem to clearly identify how you're feeling. I haven't done a thought model in a while because I've gotten pretty good at recognizing the thoughts when they come up and deciding whether or not I really need to suffer over this one or can I choose a better thought, which we're going to get to. But just the other day, I did do a thought model because someone I love did something that I was upset by. And I felt a blur of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, all at once. It was quite hard to kind of work out exactly what was going on. There was so much going on in my head at once. Until I sat down with the model, I couldn't really identify those emotions clearly. And this is where I'll add, it is imperative that you do this work on paper. Get a pen, get some paper, and let it rip. There really is something transformative and therapeutic about getting those thoughts out of your head and onto the paper in front of you. You may be surprised at what is going on in your head. So in our example, your thought might be, he knows I don't really like camping, and yet he expects me to waste my whole weekend getting dirty and peeing behind trees. So that leads me to the next step in the model, feelings. You have a thought about the circumstance, which then makes you feel a certain way. How do you reckon that thought makes me feel? Not great, right? I'd likely be angry. It's the feelings then that lead you to an action or even an inaction. So in this example, I might be a bit passive aggressive. Give him the cold shoulder all weekend. Not be overly helpful with the packing. I might accuse him of never thinking about what I want to do.
Or another common way that some people might handle this situation.
I might say absolutely nothing and then just quietly simmer on it all weekend and let it come out maybe a month or so later when he neglects to take the rubbish bin out. Whatever action or inaction coming from that thought is not likely to lead to a positive result. Yeah? Okay, so that thought is probably going to give me maybe an argument with my husband, but regardless, a miserable weekend spent disconnected from my husband. Now here's where the beauty of the model comes in. If I can see the thought that is making me feel the way I'm feeling, which is making me show up the way I'm showing up and giving me the results I'm getting in my life, then I can decide if I want to keep that thought or I can practice a new one.
Now, let me be very clear here. This isn't about just thinking happy thoughts and everything will be hunky-dory. You have to actually believe this thought, okay?
So let's give it a go. I might start with challenging the thought that's making me so angry. So this is a little off track from how Brooke teaches the model, but it has been really helpful for me. Okay, so he knows I don't really like camping, and yet he expects me to waste my whole weekend getting dirty and peeing behind trees. Is it true? Do I really not like camping that much? Does he know I really don't like camping that much? Is it really wasting my weekend if it makes him happy to have this time alone with me? That may lead to a better thought. He wants me to go camping with him because he enjoys having this time alone with me, and it's good for our relationship because we always return feeling loved up and connected. If that feels really true for you, then it's likely to lead to a more positive feeling. Maybe generosity, acceptance, excitement, even anticipation. Those feelings would likely lead to a more positive action or inaction. So being helpful, being present, or an inaction, not reminding him how much I hate camping, which I don't, just in this example. Then the result is likely to be a positive one. You're very likely to end the weekend feeling loved up and connected, rejuvenated, peaceful, happy, all those things. Now, this is very different than the thought, I hate camping, but I'll do it because he expects me to, or that is what a good wife would do, or that is what I'm supposed to do. Those thoughts, for me, would lead to feelings of resentment, obligation, contempt. Don't feel really good, do they? The action may be going, but you're unlikely to have a positive result. Rather, just build more resentment to him or to yourself for not having your own back or speaking up for yourself. And this is likely to be more damaging to the relationship than being honest about how you feel. Or let's say you really do hate camping, and you hate it more than you love the possibility of having a weekend that could result in feeling loved up and connected. Or that your disdain for camping would keep you from feeling loved up and connected. So one could argue using the thought model on those thoughts could be useful, but we're getting into some advanced skill territory there, so we'll leave that for now. But let's just say it's true, you really hate it, and there is no way you can go and enjoy it, but at the end of the day, you would like to have a good result. With this thought, there is unlikely to be any scenario where your agreeing to go returns a positive result, so then you would have to consider other thoughts. The thought could be, I love him, and I'm not going to go because camping makes me miserable and I really hate it, and this would not be enjoyable for either of us. So the thought would be, I'm not going because I love him and I love me. The feelings might then be love, could be emotional honesty, could be excitement about not going, proud for being honest with myself and with him. The action would then be to tell him this. Having this conversation coming from a place of love is going to be a lot better received than one coming from a place of contempt and resentment. And the chances of a positive outcome or result are better. But, as I said before, we have no control over what others do, say, think, or feel, so he may not receive this news very well. The result may be that he's angry and he has to sort through his own feelings about it. But the result for you is that you've been honest about your feelings and you don't have to go camping. Doing something out of obligation doesn't feel good for me. I might do something because I love someone and then I am very clear in my own head that it is coming from a place of love because this feels a lot better than obligation. The thought model for me is mostly about awareness of some of the stupid that goes through my head sometimes, thoughts that can be sneaky little buggers. And if we don't stop to see them, really look at them, we can be led from one destructive thought to another,
which can cause a lot of unwanted results in your life.
When we can notice them when they're happening and question and challenge them, that is where the magic begins. The more you do this, the easier it gets. And as I said, the other day, I did my first thought model in probably a year. It gets easier and easier to do because you become more and more aware of the needless suffering over thoughts that are not necessary. I read somewhere once that we have something like 60,000 thoughts a day. We cannot consciously be aware of all those thoughts. So taking the time to really see what's going on up there, challenging, unhelpful, or destructive thoughts, and doing some cleanup can be life-changing.
If you don't like the way you're feeling, have a look at your thoughts. If you don't like the results you're getting in your life, have a look at your thoughts.
If you change your thoughts, you truly can change your life.
And with that, I'll leave you to let that sink in and have a bit of reflection. I hope that you've enjoyed today's podcast, and I really hope it's been helpful for you. If you know someone that this might be helpful for as well, please pass it on. And if you review the podcast and maybe give me a like, that also helps get the podcast out to other listeners who this might be helpful for. Thank you all for listening today, and thanks for the great feedback that I'm getting behind the scenes as well. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. I hope you have a good couple of weeks. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.